Mrs. Gale, what are you doing?
Making a daisy chain.
Do you know how to make a daisy chain?
Yep.
Do you?
Yeah, my daughter showed me.
You look like you're struggling though.
I've not got the nails.
Shall we crack on with the lesson?
Yes.
Okay, come on then. Come on, Mrs. Gale.
I'm
It's a
a-coming.
lovely day though, isn't it?
It is a lovely day.
Okay, we're going to slowly stroll back into class. Hello, boys and girls. We're back again to teach you our new topic for this term, which is a geography-based topic. Mrs. Gale is quite rightly showing us. Mrs. Gale, what does it say?
Our changing world.
Any action? Wonderful. Our changing world. So in this unit, we will be looking at lots of different things, and I'm going to just talk about a few of them. We've got counties, cities, towns, and villages, so different types of settlements. Looking at tourism. Developing our map skills. We'll see how far we get with that, with you guys being at home. Comparing places, really important. Looking at coastlines and coastal environments. Different biomes. Mrs. Gale, do you know what different biomes mean?
Yeah, so different biomes are different environments. So you might have like the Arctic, the Antarctic, a desert.
Those are the two things I was thinking about, because those are the two things we're going to be looking at. Migration. What's migration, miss?
When you're moving to a certain area. So I think of like birds that migrate to a different area. So migrate.
Just
moving.
simply, boys and girls, just means movement.
Moving.
Changes in Hampton, so thinking about how Hampton has changed over time, and then what we can do to help. So this is really, really important. So, boys and girls, what do we mean by the term change, and how would you define it? So if you were looking up the word change in a dictionary, what would you see next to that word? Mrs. Gale, what would you see next to that word?
Oh, I think you'd have something linked to the word difference.
Difference. What shall we see?
Mm.
Okay. So, very simply, boys and girls, change means that something that becomes different, okay? So something changes, there's a difference from what it was like to how it is now. Right, so this is just a bit of a recap on what you've already learnt in previous years, and you may want to spend a minute doing this, you may want to spend a bit longer doing it, depending on how you feel. But this is what it says. It says, have you already looked at in geography and maybe even history during your time at HGS? And what impact, it's just an additional question, what impact have these changes had on the world? So for example, in year 3, when I was in year 3 many years ago, we looked at the Stone Age. So we looked at people becoming hunter-gatherers and the way in which they changed the way they were living in order to survive. We also looked at South America and deforestation, so the cutting down of the rainforests in order to create different supplies or resources, and the impact that had on not just people, but animals as well. Mrs. Gale, do you want to talk about maybe some of the things we've looked at in year 6?
Yeah, I was going to say, don't ask me about any other year.
I wasn't going to.
Okay, all right. So year 6, what have we been looking at?
So World War II?
World War II, yeah, I was going to think of World War II and Victorians. So in terms of the original question, the changes, so World War II, there's numerous changes, vast amounts of changes. I think when you look at, we looked at lots of things, machinery and so forth during the World War II and those sorts of aspects. So there was a lot of changes within World War II.
Just to be a bit more explicit, boys and girls, I think Mrs. Gale is trying to say evacuees and children actually being moved or having to migrate from one place to another, talking about the use of guns, airplanes and so on that wasn't used before. So loads of changes happened during that period of time as well. And also the rights of women. If we think about it, the women's roles changed completely during World War One. During World War Two. And I'm sure it did during World War One as well. So just have a little reflection. So in year 4, what kind of topics have you looked at? What kind of changes were there during year 4? 5, you look at rivers in geography. So what changes have you learnt about within rivers and the Tudor time as well? So thinking about Tudor Britain to Tudor Hampton, and what Hampton's like now. And obviously in year 6 we've mentioned what we have looked at, so the Victorians and
particularly the Victorians. I think recently we've just done a couple of lessons on Queen Victoria and the changes that she had in terms of those parts. So there was lots and lots of changes in the Victorians era.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mrs. Gale. So these are some of the words we are going to be coming across during this lesson. Now, you may find that we don't cover all the definitions during the lesson, so please feel free to actually pause the video and look it up if you'd like to. So I'm going to say the word, Mrs. Gale is going to try and give us a suitable action for the word. So, Mrs. Gale, infrastructure. So, looking at buildings and the development of technology and transport and so on. Impacts. Okay, well, we can go with that. Change. Okay, trade. Thank you, Mrs. Gale. Migration. That's better without her. Natural changes.
I was thinking sunlight, rain.
Okay. Human geography? Physical geography? Nice. I mean, I wouldn't give it a 10 out of 10. I'd say more a substandard 5.
Oh, I'm sure you
but
can have
not
better
bad.
at home.
Hello is the following. Hello. To identify and explain what causes the world to change. Really important because it's changing rapidly at the moment. I'm sure you're all feeling the changes too. But this has been happening for many, many, many years. So we're going to be looking at lots of things. So have a look at these images. What is causing the change? So we've got lots of images here. And don't worry if you can't see at the moment because these slides are actually on the website. So as you're watching the video, you might have 2 different devices. You might have this on your phone and you might have a laptop or an iPad and you can look at the slides as we're talking. So we've got lots of different images here. What kind of change is being caused and what's causing the change? So if I ask Mrs. Gale...
Right, I'm going to pick this one because I purposely put this one on as an additional one without Miss Mia even noticing.
What?
Yeah, so this one here was taken in 2014
Oh,
near
is it
Hampton
Hampton
Court.
Court?
Yeah, so in
I
2014...
literally live 5 minutes away
I
from
know,
there.
that's why I thought it was quite relevant. So this one was taken on February 2014 and it's linked to flooding. So here, the banks of the River Thames had flooded near Hampton Court and it had quite a disastrous effect on a lot of the Richmond parks.
Yeah.
So
and
that
the
image was taken.
businesses as well.
Yes, and you can see here, this would have been like the pedestrian element and the banks are completely flown over.
Nice. I mean, there was a flood there as well.
I
and
know.
you can see that's a greater impact on people and homes and houses. Right, thank you, Mrs. Gale. Over here we've got deforestation. So you can quite clearly see where the trees have been taken down and where the trees are. Over here we've got the river and talking about the changes rivers cause. We've got weather. Weather is one of the big factors in change. We've got volcanoes and so on. Here you can't really see it, but it's an earthquake. So the earthquake caused this change, massive, massive change. And I know you looked at earthquakes in year 4. And then obviously migration. We've got different types of settlements. So this is a city. And looking at the infrastructure, so looking at buildings, and then we've also got trading here. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Gale. So changes can occur in 2 ways. They can either happen naturally, or we as people can cause change. So there's 2 different types of changes that can occur. So if we have a look, what is the difference between the 2? Well, I've just answered that question. So maybe that question is very much invalid at the moment. So don't worry about answering it. So let's move on. And if we think about geography, geography is actually separated into 2 different sections as well. 3, in fact, when you go into secondary school. But we're going to be looking at 2 different areas within Key Stage 2.
Just out of curiosity, Miss Mia, what is the third one?
Environmental geography.
Oh, thank you. That's interesting.
Did you not think I'd know?
No, I did, because I know you're really keen on geography, and I was just quite curious to know what it was that they did in secondary. There was a difference.
Okay. So this is how we also look at geography. So we've got physical geography and we've got human geography. So physical geography is the aspect of geography which explores natural features surrounding us, so including rivers, coasts, weather and climates and biomes, volcanoes and earthquakes, etc., etc. Mrs. Gale, do you
Okay,
want
yep. And we've got human geography here. And this aspect of geography explores how human activity has affected or affects the Earth's surfaces, such as topics such as settlements, trade, looking at topics such as settlements, trade and economy.
Can you sort these images out then? So thinking about what you've just learned on the previous slide, can you sort these images out into 2 different categories, so physical geography and human geography? Physical, remember, we have no control over, it just happens naturally. Human geography, we control it. Can you think of any other examples that would fall under each category? So Mrs. Gale, if I was going to ask you to separate earthquake, where would you place earthquake? Which heading?
Well, earthquake, we have absolutely no control over it, so it would be physical.
Okay, perfect. What about migration?
Well, migration is very human. Well, it's involving human, isn't it? Because you're moving somewhere. So human geography would be linked to migration.
Okay. Your favourite, floods?
Floods, well, that's definitely physical geography.
But also, funnily enough, floods can also be caused because of human changes.
Geography, yeah.
But it can fall in both categories.
Okay, that's right.
So it can
Claim it.
people making things or building things can have a huge impact on the riverbanks and so on, and that could also cause floods. If we're thinking about deforestation, Mrs. Gale, what do you think?
Sorry, I'm also just thinking about floods about on the Upper Sunbury Road through Hampton, from the M3 up to Hampton Court. That road has got a lot of Victorian piping underneath, and I know there's always loads of roadworks, and there can be flooding there due to, and that's human geography.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sorry, where are we?
Deforestation.
Deforestation would be physical.
Yeah, brilliant. We've got infrastructure, Mrs. Gale. Where would you put that?
So infrastructure is all to do with human elements because you are creating the infrastructure, you are involved in the building, so we have a control of that.
Okay, rivers.
Rivers would be physical.
Yeah, absolutely. Lastly, weather. Oh,
Lastly, weather would be physical as well.
okay, that's fine. And then weather would be here.
Yeah.
So hopefully you can see the difference between the human and physical, and you can see that actually lots of the changes that occur around us, it's really out of our control. But there's lots of things that we do that actually have an impact on the changes that occur around us. Okay? Some of the other things you could have thought about probably could be climate change. That's a massive change at the moment. Maybe if you're thinking about the current climate and everything that's happening, looking at viruses and so on and the spread of that, that's a massive change, which again is controlled by us. And there's lots of other things you could look at. Trade I haven't put up here, but trade is
And
very much
economy,
human.
Yeah.
And economy. So that's really interesting to look at. So, impacts then. So, what impact do these changes have on people and the place? Now, this is a really interesting video, and I've placed a link here, and it shows how infrastructure has had an impact on Dubai. Dubai has been one of the biggest growing cities in the world, and actually it's gone through a massive change over the last 20 years. And this video actually breaks it down and shows you the amount of change it's gone through. You can watch the whole thing in your own time, but you can just watch the first 2 minutes because it talks about lots of change as well. Okay, boys and girls, so this is a video that we will be watching now for the next few moments. There. So as you can see, in a short period of time, a lot of change has happened in Dubai. So Dubai was literally a desert, and it's become this amazing country.
And if you just look at that final image there, it's quite a huge expansion if you look at Dubai 2020 to where it was in the 1960s.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Gale. So, what impacts do these changes then have on people and place? If we're thinking about infrastructure, what impact does infrastructure have on people, and what impact does infrastructure have on place? So, Mrs. Gale, can you tell me something about infrastructure, the impact it has on people?
Well, I was just thinking, well, clearly, if buildings are being built and roads are being built, it creates a lot more jobs. So it's going to create a lot more jobs for people. Therefore, the economy will hopefully be lifted because there'll be more jobs, more money coming in, but also a lot more money spent. So the finances of things is going to have quite an impact. That both the finance, both the economy and jobs is going to have a huge impact on people.
If we think about London, London used to have huge areas of green belt areas, so lots of greenery, lots of green spaces. And because of infrastructure, we have had to build on those places. So we've lost lots of green spaces for us. So we don't have as many parks and stuff as we did back in time. So lots of impact on place as well. And with that, it destroys habitats, animals, homes, and so on.
I also think there's quite a clear element of pollution, and you
Yeah.
think about the smog and the things that are involved in that for an infrastructure have a big effect on pollution.
And if we think about the Victorians and the Industrial Revolution, we saw how London changed significantly, and the pollution that it caused, and the health problems as well. So not just place, but the impacts on people, the health problems and so on. So this is your activity. It's quite a nice activity. Again, the activity is up, the resources that you need is up on the website, so hopefully you'll all have access to it. I'm just going to bring the camera forward so you can see. So if you look at bronze, it just says the following. Define the following terms. So we've looked at all three terms during this lesson. So change, human geography, and physical geography. So what would be your definitions for these three terms? For silver is using what you have learned today, sort out the following images into two categories. So human change and physical change. If you'd like to, you can add your own ideas as well and create your own illustrations too. Okay? Gold is the following. Select two of the images from silver. So 2 images from silver. One showing a human change, one showing a physical change. And identify the impacts each change has had on people and place. So identify at least 3 impacts. So it could be 1 impact on people, 2 impacts on place, or vice versa. So you need to have a combination. And you talk about 2 different images. I am going to show you a challenge now. There's no point in me revealing it in 15 minutes because that would be a very, very boring session. So Mrs. Gale, do the honours. So it says the following. This is quite an interesting question, actually. I'm sure Mrs. Gale would agree with me. It says rank the following in order of causing the most change in our world. And I haven't actually included this in our little ranking here. Explain and justify your order. So migration, infrastructure and technology. So if you're going to order them and rank them from the most created the most change to the least change, which order would you put them in and why? Why have you put it in that particular order? Now, Mrs. Go, it's a challenge. That's why it's a challenge question. And there's no right or wrong answer. The idea is being able to justify yourself and actually say to someone, well, these are my reasons for it. And if someone else has a different opposing idea, that's okay as well, because there's no right or wrong. But it'd be quite interesting for you to discuss it with maybe your parents or a sibling. Just this question, because it's quite an interesting one. Mrs. Gale, how would you... Mrs. Gale, how would you rank it?
I don't know how I'd necessarily rank it at the moment. I was thinking which would cause the most change in our world. And it's really hard because actually all of them would cause a change. And then instantly I was drawn to technology because I just thought that's had a significant impact in just not only from a teacher's perspective, like when I first started teaching us how we taught and how we teach now. And I was thinking when I was at school, I didn't have anything access to the internet back in the 1980s. And technology now, the amount of internet access and the way we present is quite a huge change. But unless we had the infrastructure, this would be quite difficult to have unless we had the migration of people moving to different places.
And their expertise. You can see how this creates a really interesting conversation. Maybe we're just really keen and you may not have these interesting conversations, but it's something that you may want to talk to someone older about or just have that discussion.
I'm going to have to ask you the same question. What was your thoughts?
So I had exactly the same thoughts as you, but if we think about it, back in time during the Victorian period, one of the biggest change was infrastructure. So they built all of the factories and so on. But in order for that to happen, they needed the technology. But before the technology was developed, they had the infrastructure first. With the infrastructure, they then developed the technology, so the machines within the factories and so on, and then actually creating the light bulb and being able to work longer periods. And then as a result of that, lots of people migrated from the countryside into the city.
So you're thinking primarily about the Victorian era.
I'm thinking about the Victorian era, but you can. That's an easier way for me to think. But I would, if I was just thinking just generally about this question, I would agree with Mrs. Gale. I'd say that technology would be first. Technology would be first, but I'm a bit unsure about the other two. But then I just think actually technology can't happen without the infrastructure, without the migration. All right, well, this video will carry on forever and ever and ever if you continue. So hopefully, boys and girls, that's given you quite a bit of inspiration and you're really excited about this new topic. And we'll be talking about tourism next week and the impacts tourism have. So, Mrs. Gale, tourism, human geography or physical geography?
Tourism. Human geography.
Good work. Right, that's it from us now, boys and girls. See you later. Take care.
Bye.
Stay safe. Bye.